Hopefully this is a good angle because this is going to be a long video. What's up everyone? My name is Kayla. If this is your first time to my channel, well, I kind of wish that you came for a happier video, but this has been one that's been kind of sitting in the back of my mind for 11 months now, and honestly it would have been really easy to just not do it. Recently, one of my good friends had a baby and she is kind of having some of the same troubles I had, and so it really made me think I need to get my story out there so that even if one person sees it and feels companionship from it, then I did something good. So this is going to be my whole breastfeeding experience. Breastfeeding, nursing, pumping, formula, all of it. It's hard to kind of put myself back in that place and bring it all up again because I'm 11 months postpartum now and we have been done with that. We switched to exclusively giving him formula at like 7.5 months. So it's been a little bit and it was very much out of sight, out of mind. When I was done with it, I never wanted to think about it again. It felt like 1,000,000 pounds of pressure was off my shoulders. So many times I was like, let's just move past it, especially because so much of my channel lately has not been like motherhood content. It's been more about me as a person, and so it seemed like maybe I should just let it go. But like I said, one of my friends just had a baby. She's been having some difficulty with breastfeeding too, and I was sitting with her and talking about it, and like I started tearing up talking to her because as much as I push it out of my mind, I still remember the struggle and the feelings that come with that struggle so vividly, and I just, maybe it will be cathartic for me to talk about it. So let's begin. My son Simon was born August 20th 2020, and before he was born we were like very much in the pandemic. I mean, we still are, but it was like prime COVID time. The hospitals near me didn't have breastfeeding classes until like a couple weeks, maybe like 2 weeks before my due date, and at that point I just like was over it. I didn't want to go to any classes. I felt like I'll just figure it out when I go. And all of the women and resources that I had been looking into when I was pregnant, it's not their fault. It's my fault for not seeking a more well-rounded perspective on breastfeeding. But I was very much of the mindset that I want to breastfeed, so we're going to breastfeed. I was not against formula for being formula, if that makes sense. Like my brother and I were purely formula fed. A lot of babies I know are formula fed. Like I had no feelings against it. My feeling was just that I wanted to breastfeed. Like I wanted that experience. And I very much went into the hospital thinking I'm going to breastfeed, and that's the end of the story. I didn't even consider or let myself consider the possibility that we might have a hard time doing it, or we might not be able to do it at all. And that was my bad. Before any of you sit and watch the whole video, this is not a success story if you define success as nursing or really even exclusively pumping. There's not really a happy ending to this story. But if you're like me and you were unprepared for the realities of how difficult it can be to nurse or pump, and you just want to hear that story and you want to hear my perspective, then let's continue. So I had my baby at 7:30 p.m. You know, we got cleaned up and we got moved to the maternity ward, And I think it was like 1 in the morning. It was definitely after midnight. We were all sleeping, and one of the nurses came in and she said, "Are you ready to try breastfeeding?" And I was like, I guess. Like, I was sleeping, but sure, I guess this is motherhood. They got me all set up in the bed, pillows all around me, and they gave me the baby, and I was like, what do I do? And so they helped me get the baby on my nipple, and it didn't work. Like, he wouldn't latch. He started crying. I was like totally taken aback because I just thought he's gonna latch and we're gonna breastfeed. Ta-da! Or I thought like, okay, maybe he'll need a few minutes to get it, but he just didn't. He just cried and cried and cried. The nurses were like, okay, we'll try again later. And they just left. And I was crying. I was crying so hard because I was shocked. I just did not expect that to happen. And it was just so nonchalant of them. They were like, okay, we'll try again later. But me, like, now my baby's crying and I'm crying, and my husband was surprised too because he didn't know either that it wasn't just gonna happen. I was like able to calm myself down, and I said, okay, we'll try again later. So they came back a few hours later. They brought a lactation consultant with them, and she was like, I heard you guys had some trouble. Let's try again. He just cried. He couldn't latch. We were like squeezing my boob, and it was just such a shocking experience because I just imagined this image of like me topless and my baby is nestled against me and he's feeding, and in reality there's like a nurse on this side, a lactation consultant here, my husband here, the baby here, 7 or 8 pillows around me. I'm topless, and the nurse and the lactation consultant are like grabbing my baby all over, head, arm, shoving him on my boob, and he's crying and I'm crying, and it was so chaotic. I was like, what's happening right now? It didn't work. They were like, I think you need a nipple shield. So they left and they brought me back a nipple shield, and I had never seen a nipple shield. I had never heard of a nipple shield. I didn't know this was a thing, but apparently my nipples, I mean, not apparently, I knew this already. My nipples are pretty flat. So he was having a hard time latching. They checked him for a tongue tie. They said, I don't really see anything. He just has a shallow latch. So we got the nipple shield and we tried that. He kind of got on, but it was so painful. And I was like, is this supposed to hurt like this? And she was like, yeah, it's gonna hurt in the beginning because you're not used to it. I felt successful, but I was in a lot of pain, and I just was telling myself like grit your teeth, get past it. It will get easier the more you do it. I think we were at the end of our 2nd day in the hospital, and a different lactation consultant came in. It's like, no, you're not doing it correctly. This image is burned in my brain. She grabbed my baby's head with her hand like this and like shoved him on my boob. That seems a bit much. We were thinking, really? We have to be that aggressive to get him to breastfeed? But it worked, and she left, and at this point I was getting kind of flustered because we had a different lactation consultant coming in every couple hours because I believe they were changing shifts like every 7 hours or so. And the next woman came in the next morning, and she was like, okay, I heard you guys are having trouble. Yeah. Show me what you're doing. So we grabbed his head and shoved it on, and she was like, no, 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 you need to guide him on. And I started crying right then and there because it was like, what the hell? Don't you all work for the same hospital? Like, why are you all telling me something different? I'm clearly emotional. My baby is not nursing the correct way. He's not getting the food that he needs. You're all telling me something different. Like, isn't there some sort of policy or like way of teaching that the hospital has agreed on? It was so frustrating. But this woman came in and she was incredibly nice. She was so gentle with him, and she got him to latch. And it was not painful. This was the first time in like the 2.5 days we had been there that it wasn't painful. And I felt like victory, like we got it, we're golden. Literally, she left, he unlatched, and we never the rest of the time in the hospital, got him to latch like that again. The doctors have let us know that like he is jaundiced, and I really apologize if I use like any incorrect terminology or like get my facts wrong about jaundice at all, because it was 11 months ago and I really just don't remember much. Basically what I remember is that they were saying to get rid of the jaundice, he needs to be like pooping and peeing. To poop and pee, he needs to be taking in adequate food. So they were like, we know you're trying to breastfeed, he's not getting enough. Can we give him formula? I was obviously upset because I felt like a failure. Like he literally was not getting enough food because of me. It was my fault. I wasn't against formula conceptually, but I wanted to be the one to like give him the food he needed to get better. You know, my mom and my husband were there and they were like, Kayla, you know, you can still keep trying. This is not the end, but he needs to get better. So we agreed to give him formula like in a little cup. They just like pour it into his mouth. And he did so well. Like he ate it and they were like, wow, I remember the nurse was like, wow, he's really hungry. And it just like felt so bad to hear that, because I had been really trying to get him to breastfeed for like almost 3 days at this point, and was feeling so emotional and so sad. And to like hear her basically say like, oh, you're so hungry, it's like, wow, I must be a really shitty mom because he's like starving and it's my fault. So they gave him the formula and they put him under like the UV light, and I mean, I'll link our birth video. It was really a sad time. I'm crying in like the whole video just because all the breastfeeding stuff, and then, you know, he had jaundice and he was under the light and we couldn't hold him, and it was just like so far from what I had been expecting our hospital experience to be like. I forgot to mention, but every time I was feeding him and he, you know, apparently wasn't getting anything, I was pumping afterwards. So I was trying to like build my supply, get the colostrum out. Every couple hours we would try it again. We would try to get him to latch. No nipple shield, didn't work. Nipple shield didn't really work. I would pump, my husband would give him formula in the cup. So at this point I was discharged and they moved us to like a different room out of the maternity ward, because my son was still a patient, but I was not. So they needed to, I guess, give that room to someone else. So they moved us to this like really cold, sad, barren room, like down the hallway, no neighbors. It was so isolated. This is the last thing I need right now for my mental health, to be like pushed to the cold end of this hospital and like have hardly anyone come check on us. And obviously I was still going through it, but I was no longer a patient, so like nobody cared about me. They wanted to keep him there one more night, check his jaundice levels in the morning. If he was better in the morning, then we could go home. So this is night 3 into day 4 that we're doing this. The same thing, you know, I would try and breastfeed him. He would just scream and scream and scream. I would put on the nipple shield. He would scream and scream and scream. I would be like sobbing the whole time. So he's crying at my boob. I'm sobbing, looking down at him. My husband would take him and give him formula, and I would sit there and pump and cry the whole time I was pumping. And so about midnight, a nurse came in and she said, so we're hoping to release you in the morning, but we cannot release you without a feeding plan in place. Well, I'm having trouble breastfeeding him. She was like, he's not getting enough breast milk from you. And I said, so I need to give him formula? And she was like, no. I'm not telling you need to give him formula. And I was like, but he's not getting enough breast milk from me. And she's like, yes, and we can't release you until he's eating enough. And I said, so you're telling me I need to give him formula? And she was like, no, I'm not saying that. And I was like, okay, well, we're already giving him formula in the cup, so like, let's just keep doing that. And she's like, no, you don't understand. We can't release him taking formula from a cup. He needs to be drinking it from a bottle if he's gonna drink it. And I said, so you're telling me I need to give him formula in a bottle or we can't leave? She's like, no, I'm not telling you that. I'm not saying that. And I was like, what are you? I started yelling. I was like, what are you saying then? Because you know that I cannot successfully breastfeed him. And you're telling me that I don't have to give him formula. So you're saying basically we can just stay in the hospital forever, or we have to give him formula. I ended up apologizing to her later because I was clearly just like very upset and very emotional. And like now looking back on it, I'm thinking maybe there was some legality issue where she couldn't explicitly tell me I needed to give him formula, but that's what she was saying. Like, you cannot leave the hospital if he's not taking a bottle and you're not pumping enough to give him a bottle of breast milk. So, you know, it's like, what other choice is there? So I was just pissed at that point, and I was like, just give him the goddamn bottle. You know, I look back on it and it's like, why couldn't I just understand that he needed to eat and that formula would be best for him? I feel so selfish thinking back on it because it was like, I don't know, I just couldn't be okay with the idea that he wasn't going to latch. So we gave him formula all through the night. And in the morning, his jaundice levels were way better, and we were allowed to go home with it written on a paper that we were going to give him formula. That was like our release plan. So, you know, we left the hospital, never heard from them again except to ask me for thousands of dollars in bills. You know, it was a very negative experience. I was so upset by the sheer amount of lactation consultants I saw when I was there, how all of them told me something different. Just, I felt, I don't know, maybe that's how it is everywhere. Again, I feel like my expectations are my own worst enemy in this situation, but it just was so jarring, and I felt so manhandled by them, and it was just traumatic. It was honestly traumatic. So moving on to part 2, we're home now, and every time he needs to feed, I try to breastfeed him. No nipple shield, screams. Put on the nipple shield, he screams. I give him to my husband gives him a bottle, and I pump. And in the beginning, we really didn't need formula because my supply was crazy. I was pumping like 32 ounces a day right in the beginning when I came home from the hospital, which is, according to my lactation consultant, that's a lot for the beginning. Obviously, I was still very upset he wasn't latching, and I was crying every time. But then once I started pumping, I would feel better because I would feel like at least I'm giving him my milk. Then at least I have a good supply. And I just remember people coming to my house and they'd be like, how are you guys doing? And I would be like, we're doing great. He's sleeping so well. It's so like wonderful having him, but I'm having a really hard time breastfeeding, and it's devastating, and I cry literally every single time. And just thinking about him waking up and having to feed him, I would feel this immense sense of dread because I knew what was coming. I knew he wasn't gonna latch. But I just felt like I can't give up. I cannot stop trying. So I think he was like 2 or 3 weeks old, and I contacted my insurance company and I asked them about lactation consultants. There was only one within 100 miles of me that my crappy insurance covered. She wasn't doing in-person consultations at that time because of COVID. So we set up like a FaceTime consultation, and if anything, that made it worse. I'm going through the normal stressful situation of having my baby screaming as I'm trying to get him to latch, but now I'm topless on a camera with a stranger, and she is like trying to tell me what to do, and I can't hear her over my baby screaming, and my husband is holding the phone, and it was just like so chaotic. And so she was telling me like some exercises to do to see if my son had a tongue tie, and like I don't know. So she's trying to look in his mouth like through the FaceTime camera, and she's like, I don't really see one, but he seems to have some mobility issues, like tongue mobility issues. So we ended that appointment, and I was like, I feel worse now because there's no help. What do I do? When he was like a month and a half, and keep in mind, this whole time I'm still trying to get him to breastfeed, never once did he latch. I contacted my insurance company again, and I was like, listen, I need an in-person consultant. There is one in my area, but you guys don't cover it. And they agreed to, I forget what it's called, but they agreed to reimburse me for that consult. These people, I love them. I seriously love the woman who came to our house, and you know, like I said, this is not a success story, but what little success we did have, I completely attribute to her. So she came to our house, and she was so kind and warm and comforting to me, and she came totally prepared. She had a scale to weigh him before and after his feedings. She had like different pump parts and nipple shields in her car. She told me that the nipple shield they gave me at the hospital was like way too big for me. She told me that my pump parts were way too big for me. She taught us like everything. She basically said that because we were having so much trouble breastfeeding, our best chance at getting him to latch would be if I was in a reclined position, or if I was laying down and having him feed like side by side with me. You know, she came in our bedroom, she watched me lay down with him, she weighed him after he ate, and it was good. He latched. Like, we had a breastfeeding journey, and she was very upfront with me about like, you know, just because he's latching right now doesn't mean he always will, but like, I'm giving you the resources to keep trying. She did not think he had a tongue tie, but that he did have like slight limited tongue mobility, which is basically what the first consultant said as well. Our pediatrician had already told me, no, he doesn't have a tongue tie. And this consultant told me, you know, you can take him to the pediatric dentist. I think pediatric dentist, is that right? They do. I might be wrong, but like the person who corrects tongue ties. You can bring him to that doctor, and he will perform the surgery. He'll do it for the slightest limitation. She said, but it is so slight, and there are so many other factors involved, like my nipples and how long it had been. She said there are so many other factors that even if you got it surgically repaired, like, it's so small that it might not make any difference. She said there's a good chance it wouldn't make any difference. And it wasn't large enough that it would impact his feeding when he was older. It wouldn't impact his speech when he was older. And so she's like, I'm not going to tell you go or don't go. I'm telling you they will do it if you bring him, because they will do it for any baby. I don't think it's like the answer to your breastfeeding problems. And so my husband and I, you know, talked about it, and we were like, it might not help at all. There's a good chance it might not help at all, and that it's really not going to impact any other area of his life. It seems incredibly selfish to like put him through surgery. So we made the decision not to do that. I'm not gonna say his name, but there is like a very, very famous doctor in my city, and people travel across the whole country to bring their babies to him to fix tongue ties. And she was saying like he will do it, but he is not friendly, he is not comforting, he is not nice. So if you bring your baby to him, he'll be like, yeah, this baby needs tongue tie, and he'll fix it. But it's like, is it worth it? In our case, it wasn't. She left, and we breastfed. And for the next like month and a half, we mostly breastfed. And another thing was that she was shocked by my supply, and she told me I should not pump every single time I feed him, because I already had a lot of milk and I didn't want to create an oversupply and then get issues from that. So she said, you know, use your Haka, drain your breast, but like, you don't need to pump every single time you feed him. I would still pump throughout the day, but not as much as I was doing it when he wasn't breastfeeding. And we almost always breastfed laying down, and it worked. I mean, he always latched with the nipple shield. I should preface this and say we always had to use the nipple shield. He would breastfeed laying down, and it was all good. And I remember I posted a picture on Instagram. I was so happy, so proud. I felt like I was finally getting everything I had hoped for when I dreamed of like going into the hospital to have my baby. But it wasn't all roses. He started crying a lot, and we took him to the doctor for his like 3-month checkup or whatever, and they said, yeah, he probably has colic. You know, they asked how much we were feeding him, and I told them, you know, he's nursing, and then I'll give him breast milk. Very rarely do we have to give him formula. But I knew something wasn't right, because he would nurse for like 45 to 50 minutes, usually on one side. So at that age, like their wake time is so limited. I would be nursing him for like 45 to 50 minutes. I would give him to my husband because my husband was still home at this point. And then I would have to pump. And then by the time I was done pumping, it would be like pretty much time for him to go to sleep again. Like, it's not supposed to be this way. It shouldn't take this long to feed him. If he's getting enough and my supply is good enough, then why is it taking so long? We called the same lactation consultant to come for a follow-up. She weighed him and she was like, wow, he dropped like 2 percentiles. She had me feed him for 30 minutes, and then she weighed him after and determined that he had only taken in 2 ounces in 30 minutes. That was upsetting, but it was also good because it confirmed what I felt as a mother. The pediatrician like wasn't really worried, I guess, when I told him how long it was taking Simon to eat and the dropping the percentiles, but I felt like something wasn't right. We did get him to latch without a nipple shield. That was exciting. It felt so nice to like have his skin on my skin without the nipple shield in the middle, because like we really had not experienced that. But he wasn't getting enough for me. At that point, my supply had like started dipping when I was pumping. Not a ton. I was still getting like maybe like 20 ounces a day, 22, 24 on a good day. We did go on a road trip when he was like 2 months old, and I didn't pump for like 8 hours when we were gone, and he did nurse once during that 8 hours, but I didn't pump after, and like clearly he wasn't emptying me. So I don't know if it's possible that that had such a deep impact on my supply, but she told me about power pumping and she gave me some resources how to build my supply, but like, you know, she can't like build it for me. She was like, we should talk about options, because at this point your baby's losing weight. She confirmed he was taking way too long to eat. He's not getting enough. So like, what are your options? And she's like, obviously you can continue to pump and supplement with formula. Feed him on one side and pump on the other. Like, they made special bras that allowed you to do that. And I was like, oh God, no. Because I already felt like I was feeding him so much and then pumping so much. And I had to hold him in such a specific way to get him to latch that I knew I could not pump at the same time. She said my other option was, I can't remember exactly, but if I remember correctly, it was like a nipple shield with like a tube attached to it. So like the milk would actually be coming from a bottle, but the baby would think it was coming from my nipple because he would still be sucking that same nipple shield, but the milk would not be coming out of me. It would be coming like through a tube. And I remember I started laughing because it was like, what am I doing? Why would I do that? And I'm not trying to knock anyone who does do that, because if anything, this whole experience has made me understand like the lengths that moms will go to feed their baby in the way they want to feed their baby. Like, I went so much farther than I ever would have anticipated doing, especially because I thought it was just going to come so naturally. But when she was giving me those options, I just felt like, why would I do all of these extra steps, create so much more stress for myself, continue this emotional burden when it's all for like so little milk? Because like I said, my supply was dropping. So we would probably still have to supplement with formula even after all of those steps. She was real with me, and that's all I needed from the very beginning, was someone to just tell me like I was doing all I could do and that there was nothing like wrong with me. that there was nothing wrong with me for like having such a hard time, and that it wasn't giving up by like moving away from nursing. I would nurse him in the morning when my supply was the largest. If he was still hungry after I nursed him, I would give him a bottle, and then I would just pump the rest of the day, supplement with formula as needed. So we did that for a while. I would wake up and I would nurse him, and it was fine. But like after a month of that, it really started to feel like, because he almost, even with my breasts super full, he still was not really getting enough because of his latch and my nipples. Like it wasn't really the supply that was the problem. It was like the actual act of eating that was the problem. I was like almost always having to give him a bottle afterwards. And so it's like, we're sitting here for 40 minutes in the morning, you're not getting enough, then I have to give you a bottle, then I have to pump. And at that point, my husband had gone back to work and I was alone, and it was just too much. I decided I was going to exclusively pump. Chapter 3, exclusively pumping. It never went any better. Nothing ever went smoothly. Starting from that trip that we took with him at 2 months, my supply had been dipping. So when I switched to exclusively pumping, I went hard at it. I was pumping 6 times a day for 30 minutes each time, and I was power pumping at night for an hour. And I was power pumping, I would do like 2 weeks straight I would do like 2 weeks straight, take 2 weeks off, 2 weeks straight, 2 weeks off. And my supply just like never built up. I mean, I took so many vitamins and supplements and ate oatmeal every morning and had cookies and tea and power pumped, and like nothing worked. I felt insane. And it was like all I could talk about with my husband. I probably like 10 times a day, I would text him and be like, I don't understand what's wrong. Like I'm pumping and I'm pumping and I'm pumping and nothing is happening. I got all new pump parts. I actually bought another pump. You know, I got like all these bras to make it easier, and I changed my diet. Like nothing worked. My supply just kept getting lower and lower and lower and lower. And on top of that, I was really struggling with time constraints and the time needed to exclusively pump, being home alone with the baby. Further and further into my postpartum journey, and I wanted to like work out, and I wanted to get more into YouTube, and I wanted more time to myself. And the baby was taking fewer naps a day, but longer naps. And I felt like I still wasn't getting any time to myself because he would go to sleep and I would have to pump. And my pump sessions were long because I wasn't getting any milk. And at this point, my stash was completely gone. I was living like paycheck to paycheck, but bottle to bottle. Like every single time I pumped, I would just pump and pump until I got enough for his next bottle. Like hindsight, I wish I had just pumped what I could in the 30 minutes and then filled the rest with formula. But I was just so stubborn. I'm a Taurus. I was so stubborn that I would just sit there for like an hour to get 1 more ounce. I forgot what it's called. I should look it up. It's important for this video. Dysphoric milk ejection reflex, known as DMER, causes intense negative emotions during breastfeeding. I felt this from the very beginning, and I guess I just thought that it was like the trauma of my initial breastfeeding experience in the hospital kind of like made me hate breastfeeding and pumping. So then anytime I would go to feed him, to nurse him, or to pump, I would experience this very sudden dip in my mood, and it would only last like a minute, sometimes even less than a minute, and then it would kind of go back up. And then one of the moms I follow on Instagram posted about it one day, and she's like, who experiences this? She did like a poll, and it wasn't a lot of women, but I was like, whoa, this is a thing. And so I did some research on it, and it is a real thing. When you begin pumping, or when your baby attaches themselves to your nipple, that releases oxytocin. I'm reading, obviously, I can't remember all this. Oxytocin causes your breast tissue to contract, let milk down and out of the nipple. It is during that letdown that some women experience a severe dip in their mood. Some mothers experience a profound sense of doom and gloom, or sadness, fear, or anxiety. It generally lasts 30 seconds to a minute. And it says, if you could imagine a mother who's breastfeeding 8 times a day, she could be having 8, 10, or 20 letdowns in a 24-hour day. That's exactly how I would describe it, like a profound sense of dread. Any time I pumped or nursed, it was so sudden and so sad. And so like I was experiencing that every single time, and it made me not want to pump anymore because I knew that feeling was coming. And even though it didn't last long, like it's like purposely submitting yourself to sadness, more than sadness, depression. Oh God, I don't even know where I am in this story. Honestly, it's like I really tried to wipe all this from my memory, but I'm just rehashing all of it. When I was like 5 months postpartum, I decided to get the LV pump because it was on sale, and I thought this will fix all my problems. Like I can, you know, clean the house and pump at the same time, or I don't have to wait until he naps to pump. I can pump while I'm playing with him. I'm not gonna go into it. You can watch my LV review. I'll link it up there, but it did not work for me at all. And I think it really hurt my supply even more. Like I would get 7 ounces with my Spectra and then use the LV at the same time the next day and get 2 ounces from the LV. And I was trying to use it so much and make it work for my lifestyle that I think it hurt my supply even more. Around 6 months, my supply was so low. I was getting 8 ounces a day, maybe 8 to 10 ounces a day. And we were like giving him so much formula. Like pretty much the first bottle of the day would be breast milk. The second bottle would be half breast milk, half formula. And then the next 3 bottles would all be formula. Still, even though I saw him thriving on formula, like I don't think he had colic. I think he was just hungry. When we gave him formula, he was a happier baby. My husband sometimes I would get so upset the baby would be screaming and crying. I would go lay down for just a few minutes. My husband would give him more formula without telling me, and the baby would stop crying. Like the pediatrician said it was colic. I think he was just hungry. Anyway, so at this point he was pretty much having formula, and I was putting on a brave face. Like I was okay with it, but I still did feel like so mad at myself at this point because I was still pumping 5 times a day for 8 ounces, and I was just so furious at my body. Why do I continue to work my butt off to give my baby breast milk, and like it's just not working? Like why can't it just be easy? Why can't it just come naturally? I was so mad. And 7 months, I remember we went to visit my friend for the night, and I was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm pretty much done, because between 6 and 7 months it had gone from like 8 ounces to 5 or 4 ounces. So maybe I could get 1 bottle a day of pure breast milk and the other 4 were formula. I was still pumping so much for nothing, practically nothing. And that's when I got lazy with it. I got fed up with it. I was like, why am I sitting here pumping for 30 minutes 5 times a day for like no milk? And so I just stopped pumping so much. I would pump 3 times a day. I would pump when I got to it. I would pump morning and night. I always pumped morning and night, but sometimes like I would just skip the day pumps. And I knew like that wasn't gonna help, but I was just over it at that point. I just felt so over it. So he was about 7.5 months, and I remember there was one day where I pumped 2 ounces the whole day, and I said, I'm done. What is the point? What is the point of me continuing to wash these pump parts, get this whole thing set up, experience the like sudden drop in my mood every single time I'm pumping for 2 ounces of milk? And so I gave up. And at that point, it wasn't hard to give up because my supply was so low for so long. I was just done. So one day I just stopped. I just stopped pumping. And you know what? It really speaks to how low my supply was, because I did not leak at all. It just went away completely. I did not pump when I got up in the morning, and there was no leaking. My boobs were not swollen or engorged at all. My son experienced like no disruption, because at that point he was pretty much formula fed, and then we just, you know, switched 100% to formula, and he was like, okay, cool, I've been fine this whole time. It's you, mom, who's had the issue. Since 7.5 months, he has been completely formula fed. And like, while we're on the topic of formula, we have tried so many formulas. When we thought we had colic, we tried all these sensitive formulas. We got like really expensive formulas. We got organic ones. He hated all of them, and he had so many stomach problems on every single formula except for the one they gave us at the hospital when he was 2 days old. And he has been on that formula since he was 2 days old. Like, that is the winner. I will say, like, 2 weeks after I stopped pumping, randomly I woke up and my, like, around my nipple was really engorged. Not my entire breast, but just around the nipple. And I didn't want to pump because I didn't want to tell my body, hey, let's do this whole thing again. So I just like squeezed it out in the shower, and that went on for a few days, and it was a little painful, but it probably wasn't like that painful in relation to like what other women experience. It's just, for me, my supply had been so low for so long that I wasn't used to that feeling of being engorged. And so yeah, but it was just like a quick little thing, and then it went away. The second I stopped giving him breast milk, it was like my whole life changed. I felt like I had so much more time to myself. It has changed everything to stop, and I feel that my experience nursing and pumping was like way more traumatic than I can even understand now. And I thought I was over it, but I am probably just like pushing it to the back of my brain, and it's gonna come out some other time. Because the other day I was talking to my friend that just had the baby. Her son has a tongue tie, and like, she was telling me some of the problems they've been having, and it was so similar to what happened to me, that I like almost started crying in her living room, because it's like all these flashbacks hit me so hard. And it's like, you know, I conceptually know how painful labor and delivery was, but it's like a concept, you know. I don't actually feel it. I don't actually remember the pain. I just remember the image of being in pain. But when I think about like months, literally months of like looking down and seeing my baby screaming and writhing just because I'm trying to get him to latch, like, that image is, sorry, that image is like still really burned in my memory. And I don't know why it's so hard for me. I don't know if it's this hard for anyone else. I would imagine it is. But it's like, we have been done for 3.5 months, and it's still so upsetting to think about. Those like first 2 months when I was still trying 5-6 times a day to get him to latch, and it was just a complete failure every time. I don't know if I'll like ever be able to look back on that time and feel neutral about it. All of this is to say that there is so much pressure on moms to breastfeed. Knowing how much pressure there is on moms, I could not believe how hard it was to get decent support when I was having trouble breastfeeding. It wasn't until I was like a month and a half postpartum that I finally got a lactation consultant who was gentle with me and understood where I was coming from and wasn't like literally manhandling me and my baby. And maybe I just had like an unfortunate, unlucky experience, but I just was so shocked by the way that my whole experience started. And I fully take the blame for not looking into the possibility of it breastfeeding not working out for me, because I really went into it saying this is how it's going to be, and you cannot do that with a baby in any way, because nothing is going to go like you think it is ever. It hasn't. He's 11 months old and it still does not go the way I think it is. If I had taken a class, would that have changed anything? If I had read more books, would that have changed anything? I don't know if it's like the algorithm or it's just weird turn of events, but like every single person I followed on social media when I was pregnant was successful at breastfeeding, and if they weren't successful at nursing, they were successful at exclusively pumping. And it really felt like I was the only one who couldn't nurse their baby. I'm not saying that if I had been able to nurse, it would have been all rainbows, because I know from some of the moms I follow, like they have trouble randomly out of nowhere with their baby biting them, or their baby getting distracted, or their baby suddenly not wanting to nurse from them. Or with pumping, like, you know, pumping was so hard for me. And even if my supply had been good, like, would I have wanted to pump for a whole year, or would that time constraint really have gotten to me? It probably would have gotten to me either way, but I know for me it felt especially pointless because I was pumping for so long and getting so little milk. You know, it's not easy on anyone. Maybe there's like one random case out there where everything just goes completely smoothly for the mom and the baby, and they have a wonderful, like, picturesque, utopian breastfeeding experience. But I feel like that is not the norm, and that is something that I really want to stress to anyone watching this video. And I want to like tell my future self, like, I'm not abnormal because I had a hard time breastfeeding. I'm not abnormal because my milk supply was low. I'm not abnormal because my baby is on formula. My story is probably actually very common. It's just that you have to go a little deeper to find it, because not many women are posting pictures of like their bottle of formula the way that people are posting pictures with their baby on their boob. Your whole life growing up, you experience like jealousy of other people for their lifestyles, their money, their vacation, their person they're dating. And now as a mom, it's like I experience jealousy of women who get their babies to latch, or who can pump and get like 30 ounces of milk a day. It's just weird. I never thought I would be jealous of those things, but I am. And I think it's okay, because you know, everyone has an idea in their head, even if you shouldn't, even if you should go in with no expectations. Everyone has an idea in their head of what it's going to be like when they become a mother. The only thing I can really hope for myself is that the next baby, I go into it with a more open mind. The lactation consultant was already very upfront with me about the possibility that we could have the same issues with another baby, but I just really hope that I go into it next time saying, hey, Simon was completely great on formula, so like, yeah, I want to try and breastfeed because I want that experience, and I want it a lot because I didn't really get it with Simon. If the next baby needs to go on formula, great. I already know one that works well. I'm gonna wrap this up because I have 3% battery. I'm sure I forgot a bunch of stuff. Honestly, I didn't cry that much. I'm pretty proud of myself, because when I was thinking about making this video, I cried a lot. If you have any questions or anything you want to know more about, leave a comment. I will surely get back to you. If you had a similar experience, please leave it in the comments for other moms to see, because that is just the main point I want to stress, is that we are not alone. We are not abnormal or weird if we have a hard time breastfeeding, nursing, pumping. everyone's body is different, everyone's baby is different, everyone's experience as a mother is going to be different, and the only thing that we can do going forward is to be kind and gentle with ourselves. You know, I did end up developing postpartum depression. How much of that is due to this breastfeeding experience, I will never know, but I'm doing much better now, and it all ended up being okay. So that's gonna be it for me. 1% now. I gotta go. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye.